today we are going to talk about how to decide if you should be a stay-at-home mom. And I have been thinking about this, what I want to say in this video for a really long time. I think that there's a lot of stereotypes around being a stay-at-home mom, and there's a lot of just information out there that's not actually useful when you're trying to decide if being a stay-at-home mom is the right thing for you. Nowadays women have careers, they have stuff going on, and it's not always um, the likely choice that you're going to stay home anymore. That's not the norm. The norm is two working parents, and so I've just kind of seen this shift in society where we're seeing more people stay home. And I think it's an interesting topic to explore more and to really talk about the dynamic shifts that happen when you start staying home. It's not always how to decorate for fall or the best school lunch to pack, and the kind of dynamics that shift in your relationship, and some of the things that you should be thinking about outside of, making sure your kids aren't eating the incorrect food dye. I think the first thing to really make sure that you're in a good space when you're trying to make this decision of whether you're going to stay home is to really, the outside noise that happens, when we start having kids, we are all very aware of the unsolicited advice that comes our way. And some people don't like the unsolicited advice that comes with having kids, with being pregnant, and some people love it. For me personally, I love hearing about what works for someone, what didn't work for them. And so for me, I loved the advice and kind of hearing how people were solving some of the issues that come up when you have kids. Or maybe you're in a space where you have older kids and feel like you're missing out on something, and you want to look at the dynamics of what it would look like for you to stay home. And those are all amazing things to kind of look at and to see if it's possible to stay home. And so the first thing is that all of those outside dynamics and all of the unsolicited advice, you really have to kind of tune that out when you're deciding to be or walking through the decision to be a stay-at-home mom. You really have to focus on, it's about you and your family. It's about you and your partner. It's about you and your kids. If your kids are old enough that you can have these conversations with them about you staying home, they're involved in that decision. But outside factors, mother-in-laws, those kind of things, they are not going to be the ones that are dealing with, the yin and the yang that comes with being a stay-at-home mom. And so the first question to ask yourself is probably one you guys are already thinking about, and it's the most practical question that you're asking yourself when you're first stepping into, should you be a stay-at-home mom? And that is, can you afford it? Can you afford going from a 2 household income to a 1 household income? And what really needs to happen before if you ask yourself that right now, the answer is probably we can't, because we spend what we make. And so really what needs to happen is you need to sit down and start really determining where your money is going. There is a lot of videos on budgeting. One Gunther's stretching. One lady that I really, really love is Don't Be a Lemon. She was a shopaholic. She kind of, changed her shopaholic ways and really went through budgeting. And she has some really good videos on how to kind of start that. And they're not too in depth on finance. They're just basically how to budget. There's some apps that you can use. Quicken has a personal budgeting app that you can look at. Another one that's really popular is YNAB. I believe it stands for You Need a Budget. And that one I have heard, goes through, line by line of your finances. And maybe that would be really good for this discussion. If you're not an app person and you just want to use a paper and pen, I think that's great too. That's what I did. Just knowing where all of your money goes. I think that if we were all honest, like, even if we know what we're spending our money on and knowing if there's a fraudulent charge and all of those things, kind of understanding how much, like, I have subscriptions to this, I pay for this, I get coffee for this, I go to the gas station, and get a protein bar, like those kind of expenses, and how much you're really spending. When you all add it up, it can be shocking. And so kind of understanding what your lifestyle is right now. Like, what are you spending on your lifestyle right now? And if you're thinking about this and you don't already have kids, do understand that your finances are going to change once you have those kids. You're going to have medical bills. Right now I have a 1-year-old. He's going through swim. Swim lessons can be very expensive. And so those are kind of some of the things that, you have to kind of think about when you're going to be making this decision. And then once you kind of understand everything that you're spending your money on, categorizing them as, like, what are your fixed costs? So your fixed costs are things like your mortgage, if you have a car payment, your car payment, groceries, water, electricity, things that you can't necessarily get rid of or easily get rid of. And once you kind of understand your fixed costs, and then kind of the other costs of life outside of feeding yourself and sheltering yourself, if you go to the movies, those kind of expenses, kind of understanding how much you're spending, and then what are you averaging? Like, maybe you have to look at this for a couple months to see kind of what you're averaging and understand what those expenses are. And then once you kind of understand those expenses, it's time to kind of think, if it's going to be really tough for you to be a stay-at-home mom with your current budget, looking at what you can cut. And some of the things, that just thinking outside of the box. I know that I had a coworker, and she shared a story with me that she wanted to stay home. She had her first baby, and she did a line by line understanding where their finances were, and she realized that what she was bringing home, she was basically paying for, her to go have coffee, go on shopping trips, and they had a massive car payment, and they had a 2 car household, which is not abnormal. And she went to her husband and she said, hey, this is how much daycare costs. This is what I'm bringing in, and this is what our expenses are. If I get rid of the car and some of these other expenses, that's my whole take home check after I pay taxes and those kind of things. And they made the decision to sell the car and to get rid of some of those little expenses that they didn't really need so that she could stay home. That was important to her, for her to stay home for her kids. And so kind of looking outside the box on those things once you kind of budget. If you're renting, um, maybe you guys are living in a place right now because it's closer to your work, and maybe if you guys could move and get lower rent, maybe that would allow you to stay home. And so sometimes there's some things that we can do in order to cut to one income that you wouldn't necessarily think about. And if you're with a partner that you don't really know if they are going to be receptive to you staying home, um, it, it would be a good idea maybe to kind of budget these things out and coming up with some kind of game plan that you can talk to them about, and see where that. So the second question, and one that I think gets missed a lot. I know I wish I would have had this conversation before I stayed home, and that's understanding you and your partner's expectations of you staying home. And that goes both ways. We live life, and we meet partners, and they have lived their own life, and they have their own ideas about how things work and their own filters on things. And so kind of starting to open up that conversation of, what are your expectations? If I'm a stay-at-home, what are your expectations? Are your expectations that you're never watching the kids? Are the expectations that dinner's on the table at 5 o'clock? Kind of having that open dialogue will start to help you understand what it's going to look like if you decide to stay home. One of the things that I really had to be honest with myself about is, what does it look like? Like, I want to stay home. What is it that I think the average day of is going to be for me? And kind of understanding, like, if your idea is that you're gonna get up and you're gonna have coffee and you're gonna go to Pilates, and you're gonna have all of this kind of free time to do this stuff, really being realistic with yourself about, if you are going to do all of those things, you are going to need help, whether that be grandparents, your partner, a nanny, kind of understanding what that kind of looks like. One of the factors for me is my partner. He is gone a lot for work. He travels a lot for work. He will be in Australia for a month coming up. And that's a tough time for us when he's gone. I'm solo parenting. I'm not getting, an hour break. It is a 24/7 job during that time. We have great grandparents, but my mom lives in another state, and so I don't have that kind of help on a day-to-day basis. And then his parents are a bit older, and so it it looks a little bit different. They can help me for maybe an hour or something like that, but I really have to consider their energy levels, with running around after a toddler for 8 hours is not realistic in my case. And so kind of walking through what your expectations are, and then really see if that's possible. If your expectations are that you're going to be having time to go to the gym and those kind of things, then um, you need to have a understanding partner. If you an understanding partner that wants to help if you can't afford within your budget to have a nanny or someone to help you during those times. And so kind of walking through those and really understanding your expectations, your partner's expectations, it can really alleviate a lot of the stress and a lot of the things that come up when you stay home. Um, One of the things that we kind of went through was just, or I really wasn't expecting, was the power dynamic of, my partner and we did not share finances when we had a baby. We had, like, it was probably, he was 4 months before we started really commingling funds. And so that kind of power dynamic of having your own money, and then, you're kind of merging everything together. And then, normally all of his money is going towards him, and now it's going towards a family. That can be a different dynamic. And having those open, honest conversations about that. I think a lot of times we are just like, oh, he'll be fine with it. I'm staying home. I'll do all of these things. It will be so great. And we don't always have those tough conversations. And even just asking that question, like, hey, how is that going to look? When we have to share money, will you guys still have two bank accounts? Will he pay you some kind of money monthly? Will you guys be moving all of the funds into one bank account? Will you be closing out your credit cards and having a joint credit card? And kind of walking through kind of what that looks like when you don't have your own money anymore, and you are having to kind of share. And then understanding, if there's purchases and those kind of things that you're very used to just going out and spending, is there any kind of limit for your partner on those types of things? Like, is it just like their expectation is that you're going to be spending the bare minimum? Do you have to ask for those types of purchases? If you go shopping, do you have to be on a budget? Those really tough, hard questions, by having them early on, you can alleviate a lot of fights. And especially during that newborn stage, you want to try and alleviate things on your to-do list, things to talk about, because you are tired, but you're also just in la la land over kind of having a newborn and that excitement that comes with having a new baby. And so having those kind of conversations, like, um, you know, budgeting and those type of things, that's not what you want to be talking about when you're in that amount. And also, you don't want to have these types of conversations when you've quit your job, and maybe it's not exactly what you expected. And so having those tough conversations right now is really going to help in the long run. The third one, and this wasn't a big deal, as big of a deal as I thought it would be for me, but will you be happy removing those grown-up interactions that you have in your career right now? There is a lot of accolades that we get from working. There's a lot of confidence that comes from working day to day, and you're getting people telling you that you're doing a good job, and you're getting social interactions. And a lot of those interactions are going to go away when you stay home. um, for me, this was not a tough one. Seeing my little ones kind of grow up and just having that uh, experience of seeing them grow very much outweighed any career highs for me. Now, granted, I have only been a stay-at-home mom for a year. You know, I don't know what it will be like 10 years from now. I don't know if I'll stay home for 10 years. I think that's another thing, is that maybe you plan on only staying home for the first 3 years, or until they go to kindergarten, or those kind of things. And so just kind of having those conversations of yourself of how much your day to day is going to change, and what things are making you really happy right now in your life. Will you still get to have those when you stay at home? And then the next one, you know, I'm most people that are deciding to stay at home are women. Um, it doesn't have to be, but most are women. And women nowadays, we have careers, we've built something, we invest, we do all of this stuff. And so understanding what the opportunity cost is, for when you stay home, because there is an opportunity cost. There's an opportunity cost with not staying home. There's an opportunity cost with staying home, and what you get to miss out on both sides of it. You know, the opportunity cost for me by staying home is I'm going to have a gap in my resume. I was in finance before. I loved it for a lot of years. And so for me, I had to be honest with myself about what the opportunity cost really was. About a year before I got pregnant, I was already in that phase where I wasn't loving my job. I wasn't feeling fulfilled on a day-to-day level. And so that opportunity cost, I think I would have already been dealing with that opportunity cost if I didn't stay home. Like, it would have been a career change. It would have been, I needed to start doing something different. And so it ended up kind of, there was a path already there for me. When I was making this decision to stay home. But that is something that you're going to have to really be okay with, is that there is going to be certain opportunities that you miss out on by staying home. Now the other side of it is there's a lot of things that you're going to miss out on if you go back to work too. Um, you know, like I said, watching my little one, just personality coming through, and learning who he is as a person, to not have that experience because I was at work every day would make me very, very, very sad. So I'm very grateful that I decided to stay home. Thank you for watching. If this content was helpful for you, please hit the like button.